Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Wiam Nemu. And our two lovely guests today is Marla Garmo and Mariam Razak. So I'm going to give you a little background about these two lovely ladies. Marla is a social worker. She is a lover of travel and education. She currently serves as a success coach in the CHAMPS and Warrior 360 programs at Wayne State University. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, as well as a Master of Social Work and Master of Business Administration, both from Wayne State University. Marla is an active board member for the Chaldean Cultural Center and is currently working on the Founders Gala for our October 2023 gala. And Mariam Razak is an Iraqi native and an alumni of University of Kufa College of Medicine and Baghdad University. She is an entrepreneur who oversees international trade in the Middle East and Asia. She is redefining her home in the United States and currently working on a program in language and cognition at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Wow, ladies, you guys have a very impressive educational background. But what attracted me about the two of you is when we were at Heather Raffo's event at she had several events here in Michigan, but at one of the events you were both there and you were sharing this trip that you guys took to Iraq by yourselves all over. And I was like, wow, I feel like I was watching a movie based on what you were describing. So I was very intrigued by the trip. And given that you have different backgrounds, Marla, you were born in the United States, and Mariam, you were born in Iraq. So I want to get to that trip, but let's learn a little bit about you guys first. Starting with this question for both of you, actually, is where were you born and where did you grow up? So Marla, we'll start with you.
Sure. I was born here in Michigan, in Metro Detroit area. My parents were married actually in the United States. They got married in 1977. And yeah, we basically lived in West Bloomfield ever since then.
And prior to this trip, had you visited Iraq or no?
No, that was my first time traveling to Iraq. I've been to, lots of countries, kind of all over the world. But no, that was my first time in Iraq.
Okay. And then Marla, I'm sorry, Mariam, you guys' names are so close together.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be doing this a lot.
That's okay. That's okay.
So Mariam, tell us where you were born.
I was born in Iraq, and I had a experience that many Iraqis share. It was sort of transient between the Middle East and the West, and we kind of always moved around. And our existence in every host country was this is temporary. Eventually, when the regime fell in 2003, we moved right back. I went to high school and college there and sort of tried to reconnect to my roots earlier than Marla attempted to, yeah.
Yeah, so for both of you guys, you've had totally different experiences. With Marla, what was it like growing up as a Chaldean American? And were you even aware of your roots when you were younger? Or is that something that you discovered the older you got, or maybe at university level? Or what was that experience like?
Yeah, so you're growing up, when you come from an ethnic background and you're sort of assimilating into the United States, I think there's an idea of we're different than maybe like the majority. And when I went to school in the West Bloomfield School District, there weren't a lot of Chaldeans like how it is today. So, I'm coming to school now with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but maybe I'm eating burek or tikhrata or something. So there was definitely a feeling of being different, and knowing that I'm a part of being Chaldean, but fully understanding what that meant didn't happen so much later. We grew up going to the Chaldean church, and we understand, and, all of my family was here in the United States, but it's not like I really understood and appreciated what it meant and really understanding the history of it. So it wasn't until I was like much older, probably even a little bit after college, that I really kind of understood what it meant. But honestly, I think the appreciation of it was like the was due to meeting Mariam, and then of course having this trip that I would never have been able to take if it wasn't for her. So I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I think my full kind of appreciation of being Chaldean and being from Iraq and being Iraqi really didn't come until the last couple of years.
Yeah, I can imagine Mariam having a lot to do with this, but
Yeah.
Mariam, you were born in Iraq, and so that I was born in Iraq as well. So, but I left when I was fair. I was actually 9 years old when I left Iraq, and we missed the Iraq-Iran war like by an inch. It was that close, I think, within a couple of months. So we didn't experience the wars, but we experienced some of the other things that happened, just living under oppressive regime and such. What did you experience? Did you go as a child? Did you experience any of the wars? You said that you were moving from various countries and such, but what was it like for you as a child? What did you see? What did you witness? What were maybe some of the more traumatizing things and the more beautiful things?
So I was born in '89, right before the Gulf War, and I did experience that as a child. I remember vaguely like moving from country to country. Our first stop was Saudi Arabia, and I remember being out there. Um, but I also we were very connected to our roots. Being Iraqi was very central, and we did anywhere we would go. That was reiterated to us in some form or another that this is we're just here temporarily and we're Iraqi and we try I think my parents tried to build a kind of Iraqi bubble for us wherever we went and luckily we weren't alone. My uncle's family was with us as well. And then when we relocated and after the 2003 war, I did get a glimpse of the aftermath of that. I was there during ISIS. I was there. I mean, I remember American soldiers coming into our homes looking for weapons. Um, I remember like battles between different militias. So I did explosions. I've witnessed a few of those. But it was sort of slowly became the norm, I guess. And there's others that have experienced worse than us. I know we missed the 90s economic sanctions, and I don't know, Liam, if you've talked to Iraqis, they would tell you 100 wars and not one economic sanction, right? The devastation that took. Luckily, we didn't experience it, but that also was devastating for the country and for its citizens.
Yeah, I know a lot about the sanctions. I ended up writing something around that, and I visited Iraq the first time in 20 years in the year 2000. And what I saw, the devastation, because having the Gulf War, which created such destruction, and then afterwards this long unjust sanctions, which the wars were unjust as well, that people had to endure. But one thing that was just, despite what the people had endured, their spirit. I
Yeah.
mean, I always say how in my books, whether I'm talking about the wars or the sanctions, or whether it's political or religious topics, I'm always including the humor and the heart and the spirit of the Iraqis, because they have endured and they find their ways, and their homes are still open and very loving. And this is why I'm so happy that you guys are here today, because what I heard about your trip just reminded me so much of my trip before all these fears were kind of uh, layer upon layer from ISIS, and then other stories that we hear. It gets so much that you get to the point where you don't want to visit, you know. So, but you guys had a different experience. And before again we get into your trip, how did you two meet?
I met Marla at my cafe in Birmingham. I caught her giggling and looking at me, and so I called her out on it. I was like, "Hey, you're talking about me," and we've been inseparable ever since. Our connection was instant.
Yeah. I would go to Mariam's Cafe during like the height of the pandemic when the university was closed for me to work from there, and I just found working from home didn't work for me. So I like find places where I could go. And Father Andrew Siba, he recommended like $7 Cafe in Birmingham. So I would go, and it was just like a perfect place to be. It was just quiet, and it had really great drinks. And eventually, you're there long enough, you're just going to meet the owner and become friends. And I mean, I didn't expect, if I could look back, whatever, 2.5, 3 years ago, whatever that was, to think today, like, we would be talking about a trip that we took together to Iraq. I would never have predicted that, but it was just so easy to connect. It was, there was just an instant, like, similarity there. Like, you're Iraqi, I'm Iraqi, and then we just clicked, and it really is, it's a beautiful friendship, I think.
When I first met Marla, I told her I knew immediately that you were Iraqi. I felt that she was Iraqi.
And I was surprised by that, because I always would think that, like, I don't look typically, Middle Eastern or Iraqi. I had much blonder hair then, I have green eyes, whatever. And Mariam just like dispelled all of these beliefs that I had about myself and was like, nope, you're Iraqi. I know it. That's
Yeah.
it. And I was like, okay, I'm not
Yeah, I do.
pretending. I'm not trying to avoid
I have
that.
the impression that Miriam can easily read people, and that's what
Yes.
got you guys through. I think we need to hire you as our tour guide, Mariam, and the next trip.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
it's funny that you mentioned Father Andrew. I don't know how many people I can count that he has introduced, myself included. Like
Yeah.
many of the people that I met were through him. So he's always a blessing when he introduces people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you two met somehow or another. The trip about Iraq came up.
Yeah.
Whose idea was this?
I was already in Iraq. I was taking care of family matters, and then Marla called me and told me, "Hey, do you know there's a World Arab Golf Cup happening?" Which I was aware of, but I'm not like like particular have interest in soccer. And then I'll let you, Marla, take it from there.
Yeah, so it was like maybe a couple days after Christmas that Mariam and I were speaking, and I mentioned like, hey, you're there in Iraq, like you should go to Basra to go to this Gulf Cup. And she was kind of like, well, why don't you come? And it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, like, why don't I come? And um, so I, of course, I had to talk to my parents, and they were like, kind of used to me just doing these sort of impulsive things, these in their eyes crazy things. And I think because it was so quick, like I booked my trip like maybe the 28th of December, and I left like January 3rd or 4th, something like very early in January. And I think because it was such a short time between booking and planning this trip and actually going, there was no opportunity for me to like get super overwhelmed in like all of these fears that people, wanted to say, like, is it safe? It's or whatever. Yeah, so Mariam and I were speaking about the Gulf Cup because I was just like really excited that Iraq was hosting the soccer tournament. That was really cool. It was like, shortly after the World Cup that happened in Qatar, which was in November. So this is just a few months later. And, Qatar was one of the teams that's playing in the Gulf Cup in Saudi Arabia. So some of the teams from the World Cup were playing in this like smaller tournament. And I just thought it would be really cool for the country. And so that's kind of how we were talking about it, because I love soccer. Mariam now does, but didn't at the time. And she just was like, come. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And we did.
And by the way, I called my uncles and I said, "Hey, my friend is coming, and we want to go to Basra." Last time I was in Basra, I think was 2008. So I don't know Basra very well. And everyone was scrapping to find a contact in Basra so that they could help us navigate the situation there. So the Gulf Cup was a really big deal for Iraqis. I guess we got a real sense of that when we arrived. And I'm glad that Marla introduced me. And you'll see this theme throughout our conversation, that I was able to see Iraq again through her eyes. And that was so precious to me. And yeah, so then she came over. We met in Baghdad. We had a little tour of like the old city in Baghdad. And then, yeah, we took a car ride to Basra.
So, what were some of the adventures, some of the cities that you visited and the adventures? Because we hear a lot about the visits that are happening, especially this year. There were so many groups going to Iraq, and they tend to stay in the northern area where the villages are, or in the Kurdish area. And most of them, when I ask them why, it's their concern is the safety. They feel like it's safer there. They said, well, we heard it's okay, in Baghdad and other and more southern cities, but they haven't really felt comfortable to go there yet. But you guys did the opposite. I don't even know if you went to the north, but what cities did you go to, and what were these experiences like?
So we started in Baghdad. That's where I flew in and out of, and then we traveled to Basra. We were there for a couple days for the tournament. So we went to games on 2 days, so 4 games total. And then from Basra we flew into Erbil, and then when we were there, we connected with some people through a mutual friend, and we went to the first day we stayed in Ankawa. So we were we saw Ankawa, and we were hosted there by someone from the Shtama Foundation. And then we went the next day. We were picked up by a guide, and we went to Telkepe, Karamlesh, and we went to and then we went to Mosul. And then the next day we went to Al Qosh and some of the areas around there. And then we flew back to Baghdad, and that was the end of the trip. So we did get to spend some time. Oh, and we did have a day in Erbil, of course, as well. So we did see a lot. And it's interesting because when I came back and I was telling my parents about the trip, they were like, you've been to places that I've never been. And they spent, the first half of their life, or, the quarter of their life there. My dad left when he was 25. My mom was 17. So they've never even been to Basra. And so it was really interesting to have this experience of a country that's their home, that they've never even seen some of these places that we got to see. I think that's all the places. Mariam, did I miss anything? Oh, we went to Batnaya. Yeah, we went there too. So we went to a lot of the little smaller villages when we were driving around, which was really cool to have these personal guides that were just driving us around and making sure that we got to see all of these really cool historical monuments, this history that's been around for a bunch of years. We went to see this dam. We went to the Lalish temple, the Yazidi temple. Yeah, we did a lot. We of course, we went to, everyone always asks, did you see Rabat Hermes? Of course, we're not going to go to Al Qosh, and they're not going to take us to Rabat Hermes, what they're so proud of. So it was really incredible, just the whole trip.
So, you know what? When I was in Iraq, I was there for 3.5 weeks. And I also, unfortunately, I wanted to go places, but people were so afraid of me going anywhere. So they really limited my ability to travel, even though I have 3 cousins that were born in Basra and they still live there.
Yeah.
They were born over 50 years ago. I think, I don't know, they might be in their 60s. They were born there. They lived there. They've given me, I recently wrote an article, and they were telling me there's a community there, there's a church there. So I would have loved to see that. But I give you guys so much credit for just really being adventurous like that. Mm-hmm. And give me some of the most memorable things that you, and you told me about something that I thought, okay, these girls, you were reminding me of Thelma and Louise. Are you guys too young for that movie? Or
No.
Okay.
Not too young.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things, and it wasn't because just about the adventurous part of you, but as well as to really give credit to the heart of real Iraqis. Okay, I know a lot of things happened throughout the wars where certain people snuck into our birth country, and they're not the same. The real Iraqis, from my experience, not just growing up, but even visiting there, the majority of them, yes, of course, there's negativities but the majority, there's this sense of wanting to help, which I had experienced in other ways. But you guys had one experience that I found very, it was it's funny, but it really shows the hearts of the Iraqis. And I don't know which one of you guys I don't even know if you know what I'm talking about.
I think you're talking about when we got picked up when we were leaving the stadium during the rain.
Yes, please share.
So I'll tell it from my perspective, because I think my perspective is better. So the two games we went to, the second of the two games was Saudi Arabia versus Iraq. So of course, the home country's playing. They're playing a team that played in the World Cup, that beat Argentina, the team that won the World Cup. So it was like so much energy in the stadium, but it was like this crazy rainstorm, which is like kind of unseasonable, I think, for that time of year in Bosnia, because everyone was commenting about like they're like the streets aren't even equipped to handling this kind of level of rain. So it was cold and rainy. And we were sitting at the stadium that's like obviously it's a soccer stadium, it's open, there's no heat, so we were freezing, and we were like not dressed appropriately for this game, so we were like, we have to leave. So after they scored the first goal, we're like, all right, they're gonna win this game, no problem, we can leave, it's fine, like whatever. So we left it like the 75th
We
minute,
also
it goes until
we also
9 minutes.
left we also left earlier every game, like about 15 minutes, just because of crowd control. There wasn't
Yeah.
good crowd control, so that was a safety thing that we did.
So we're trying to find like a taxi as we're leaving the stadium, and of course like there's tons of people that are also trying to do the same thing. And in Iraq and in the Middle East, they have like their version of like Uber ride sharing service called Kareem. So Mariam's on her phone, she's trying to figure something out, and then we get in this car, and I of course like I don't speak Arabic, so I have no idea about the exchange that's happening. I'm like, I can get into a car.
You're like trusting your life with
I'm
Mariam.
trusting my life with this girl. We've already been traveling for like 5 days together. I'm like, what? I got nothing to worry about. So we get in this car, and I'm just happy that I'm in a place that's warm and dry. So I'm not paying attention to what's going on. We're driving, and of course by this point the game is over and Iraq has won. So like the streets are just everybody's partying, and everybody's excited, and you see people out, and like there's streets that are flooded, and we're just going to a restaurant because we haven't eaten in like a few hours. So, we get to this restaurant and we get out of the car, and I noticed like Mariam didn't pay him. And I was just like confused by this, like, because we're always paying cash, like we're, giving out money. And she was like, he wasn't a taxi driver. I said, what do you mean he wasn't a taxi driver? She goes, he was just a guy that was going in this direction. And he said he would take us when he saw us. And I was like, what do you mean? We just got in the car with some random guy. And she's like joking, like, she's like, yeah, he even said, two American girls should be careful about who they got in the car with. You might get in the car with the wrong person. And I'm just like, thank God we got in the car with the right person. But again, like it was at that point, I was already sort of accustomed to this hospitality that I've never experienced in any of the countries I've ever been to. And so, like, as much as it was a surprise that happened, and certainly like not how I would prefer to travel in a car, but I was like, okay, like it was totally fine. And it was really cool. He wouldn't take any money from us. Like, I guess Mariam said she offered him, and it was just, he was just a really nice guy. And that's kind of what we experience often.
But I'm going off of what you were saying about it not being safe. It is, you have to be careful like any other country, and it's very inconvenient. Marla can talk to you about how like the travel throughout the country in Iraq is unlike anything else. There's no set times. Things are very lax. People are very adi Allah mashiha.
And they decide
this
arbitrarily.
Is they're like, we should put like a warning: do not do what Marla and Mariam did.
Yes, like don't try this at home.
It's very yeah, all these things are true, but if you're like flexible, if you're patient, you will have a lot of fun. We were still able to go to the stadiums. We still left in a reasonable time to be safe. Like there's a lot of precautions that we took to make sure that we were safe. Of course, I vetted the guy. I looked at him. I
was just gonna say that's why I called you. Like you can read people, because being from there is a difference when you go and you have locals guiding the situation. They can tell. And when I went in 2000, on the way out, at that time the airport, Baghdad airport, was closed, so we had to drive from Baghdad to Amman, Jordan, to catch our flight. And within like an hour of driving, and at that time there's no cell phones or anything like that. So on our way there, our car broke down. Oh. And we had somebody generous enough to pick us up. He was driving this mom and her son. They were like, she was older and he was an adult son. They were generous enough in their small car to give us a ride all the way. It was like there was like 13, 14 hours left. And so
Wow.
it was inconvenient for them, but they drove us all the way without charging us to Amman. So things like that. And at that time, like we needed that, but then we got on trusting that these people are just going to be trustworthy, and they really were. And so this is why when I was listening to your stories, it took me back to the days where before all this really just so much negativity had fallen upon Iraq. And that brings me to the next question. I want to ask you first, how did this trip influence you as Iraqi Americans? And then, what misconceptions, whether it's for you guys or do you think people have of that region that were, especially for you, Marla, dispelled through this trip?
Yeah. I think for me it inspired a newfound like pride in being from this country. Like I my parents were born here in the United States, so I had no choice but to grow up like as an American. And now as an adult, like I have every opportunity that's available to me to really explore this part of my identity, this what this means for me. And so going on this trip was so transformational. It was so, life changing. Right now, one of the things that Mariam is helping me do is I'm trying to apply for my Iraqi citizenship. Now, again, this is another thing that we should put a disclaimer on, that it's not an easy process, and they're certainly not making it easy for me to do this. I think that there's a lot of questions about why I want to do this, and for me, it's twofold, right? I want to legitimize this part of who I am. I'm eligible for citizenship and I want it. I want this part. It's not going to do me any favors traveling in the world, except if I'm in Iraq, but I want it. I want it for me, and I also, want it. If I go back, I want to have that paperwork to help me travel through the country. And my parents are like, they think it's funny that I want to do this. And for me now that my parents are of a certain age, like I keep encouraging them. Like I want them to go back too. I want them to go and see their country that they haven't seen since like 1991, I think is the last time that they were there. And so much of it has changed, and so much of my parents' memories are like frozen in time. So when I was there and they would call me and they would talk to me about, oh, where are you going? Where are you now? And they would have this memory of it, which isn't the same anymore. And I didn't like that I had to be the one to kind of disappoint them about the change. Because I would love for them to keep this image that they have in their mind of this place, that's their home. But I want them to go back and see it. If they can go to Turkey, if all these people travel to all these other countries in the Middle East, they should be able to go to Iraq too. That's the biggest thing. Like that's my biggest takeaway. When I was like at this trip, like I didn't really have an opportunity to like tell a lot of people, and I'm just not like a really super public person when it comes to like these kinds of details. But when I got to Iraq, I like posted a couple pictures like on my Instagram story, and then it became this like thing where people were like, "Oh my God!" So inspired by my trip that they kept asking me to keep posting. And so then it sort of became this thing where I was like kind of experiencing this trip for more than just me, that other people were following along and asking me questions, and how did you do it, and who coordinated all this for you, and where are you going next, and oh my God, that's where my mom was born. Like take as many pictures as you can, and just like they were sort of like living vicariously through me, and I didn't expect that whatsoever. I just wanted people to see like where I was going to think, because I think that they would think it was cool. Like other people have gone back to Iraq, but they haven't gone in the way that I went, which was this independent trip. I didn't go with the church, I didn't go with the group. I flew to Iraq by myself. I met Mariam there. I flew home by myself. I get that this isn't everybody's comfort level, but it showed that Iraq doesn't have to be this place that has to be this big thing. It very much can be a destination. It very much can be a place that you go and travel to. And I was hoping to convey that to people as much as possible.
And Mariam?
I want to go off of one of the things that Marla brought up, and that she's working on her citizenship paperwork. One of the things that I learned going through Mosul and the villages there with our guide Sufyan, I think he's from the Shlama Foundation, excuse me, he sort of gave me an understanding of the grievances. There's still a relatively decent Christian community in Iraq today. and I kind of got a sense of the grievances that they were going through and how politically they were being manipulated and misrepresented. And that's one of the things that I was hoping that we can, a message that we can hopefully relay is that get your citizenship, try to get politically active in the Iraqi democracy that is very unique to the Middle East. All the Arab countries in the region are looking towards our example, and your voice can be heard and should be heard. And even if you're not educated maybe on the political scene in Iraq, I'm sure that there's I don't know, if you are uh, putting that word out there, but that's a very important thing. What we seen was unfortunate, and we want to empower minorities to raise their voice, give their voice, and I think it's for an overall healthier democracy.
Yeah, actually, we haven't focused as much on that. We're trying to, we're even trying to plant that seed here in the United States so that people can have that interest. And there's so much to do that connecting with you two, just like you said, Marla, this trip, you were not aware it was going to create what it created, but it does. Planting these seeds, like Mariam, you talking about this right now, it puts these ideas into us, or anybody that's listening and recognizing the importance of it. It's wonderful that each person is doing their own little thing. And I really appreciate that. You seem, both of you, you've gone through so much, Mariam, when you were telling me even about how your home was, how the US entered your home. And the first thing I thought is that, those split feelings that we have, I had them during the wars, even though I wasn't there. But anytime I saw bombings on Baghdad or Iraq, there was this guilt factor that I'm here kind of enjoying a different lifestyle, but then the people that I love are somehow being hurt, or the land that I love, as well as I love this land. So I really appreciate your tone and your attitudes, and there's so much love and innocence and respect for the countries, and trying to kind of create that unity that I just think is very, very important for us to make this, whatever you guys have in mind, to make it successful, to understand our identity, and to serve both countries, in a positive way. So it's beautiful to see young women doing things like that. I really appreciate all the work that you do. And, we went over just a couple of minutes. We're okay. But any last words that you guys have before we wrap this up?
I'll give it to you, Marla.
There was a moment when we were at the game, the Iraq versus Saudi Arabia game, and the national anthem was playing. I think this was probably one of like the most memorable moments I had. Was just seeing this stadium filled with people, being so proud to be Iraqi, and just like, having gone through so much as a country. We all know the story, but to see this was so beautiful, and it was so inspiring, and it like I said, it changed my life. And my message to anybody that's watching is, this is a safe place to travel to, as long as you are aware of your surroundings, just like you would be anywhere else. And I'd really encourage people to go and go back and see it, and don't just stay in the north. Travel to Iraq, to Baghdad. Go to Basra. I think there's so much to see there. There's so much more of the country that I didn't get to see. There's so much history there that I can't wait to go back so I can see the other parts. Spend more time in Tel Kepe, spend more time in the places that mean something to me, but also go to the places that mean something to the rest of the Iraqis. We're not just the only people that are from this place, from this land. There's so much history there. There's so much other parts of this country that are worth seeing, and I really encourage people to do to go and to see it, and to make this pilgrimage back, especially if their parents are still around, to really take them. And the one thing I tell everybody is, when they ask me if it was safe, I say, well, they're building a JW Marriott in Erbil. So if they're building this, flagship brand of a Marriott hotel, I think it's a safe place for people to go and see. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. Yes, there is so much history there. It's a cradle of civilization. It's where, our Western system was built off of so many inventions and developments that were created there. So thank you, ladies, so much again. And, and who knows, maybe I'll be one of these days on a trip with you guys. Okay. I feel
Yes.
I'd be very safe with you
Inshallah.
too. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.